Hi, everyone. You've got questions and we've got answers. We're coming to you live from the 2024 Global Ethics Summit in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Bill Coffin.
For the third time.
I'm Bill Coffin, and this is the Ethicast. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the live Ethicast feed here at the 2024 Global Ethics Summit, coming to you live in Atlanta, Georgia, and virtually all around the world. Big shout out to all the folks who are attending online. We're so glad to see you. We're so glad for the questions you're sending our way as we go into the tail end of our second day here at GES. Our first day was BELA Day, which is a day of content aimed very much at the community of the Business Ethics Leadership Alliance. And the great thing about being a member of BELA is that there's a service wherein if you have any question whatsoever about ethics and compliance, you can send them over to us. And then we will route you to a subject matter expert or a resource that will give you an answer to your question. Now, a lot of these questions can be rather particular to a specific company's needs, but a lot of them are very, very discipline oriented. They're from the top of the mountain. They speak to the tidal forces that are shaping ethics and compliance today. So that's why we have this program to speak to these questions from a thematic level. And giving us the answers we're all craving is once again Erica Salmon Byrne. Erica, thank you so much for joining us.
Bill, it is my pleasure. I think this is a record for you and I.
It is.
We have never done this many Ethicasts in a single day. But you guys keep having questions. And so as long as Bill and I are here, we're going to keep answering.
That is a fact. And before we get started, just a big shout out to everybody who's been coming by the desk live here in Atlanta and those who've been giving us questions in the chat. We are seeing every question. We're getting them, we're bringing them in. So thank you very much for your questions. We will answer them as fast as we can get to them. But you know what? If a question comes in and we can't get to it before the end of the Global Ethics Summit, have no fear, because BELA Asks never goes away. We will definitely get to your question. So if you have a question, shoot it our way. We want to hear from you. Yep. But with that in mind, I'm going to get to our first question of this broadcast.
Yes.
And this is a fundamental one, but I think it's a really good question, which is, how do you build strong working relationships between the ethics and compliance function and other allied functions?
Yeah. Yep. And so this was, I think, a question that was already on people's minds yesterday after BELA Day, and then was even more reinforced by the session that we had this morning on the view of compliance from the director's seat. And so Melissa Barnes, who had been a CICO herself at Lilly and is now a director, she talked about this concept of allied functions and really thinking through the relationship between what she, when she was in seat, called her sister control functions, which is a terminology that I have shamelessly adopted from Melissa for years. But, it is a critical piece of the puzzle, without question. And so there's two pieces here, right? There's the formal relationships you can build with your sister control functions. And then there's the informal relationships that you build with your sister control functions. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to start with the formal ones, because the advantage of a formal structure, or a formal element of the structure, is it's not relationship dependent, right? So if you have you have a change in your audit committee or audit department head, or your CISO leaves, it's you still have those connection points, and it's not reliant particularly on the personnel that are involved. So right. From a formal perspective, one of the things that a lot of companies will do is they will have what we call an ethics and compliance steering committee. And so basically this is a group of control functions and often key members of the business who will periodically get together to talk about the initiatives that a particular company is engaged in from a compliance perspective. They're very common. We see them a lot. The good ones are ones where you are very intentional about who's at the table. They are exceptionally agenda driven, and people bring their problems to the steering committee conversations to solve. So it's not a readout, right? It's not a readout. Anybody can read a dashboard. You don't need to use the meeting to read the dashboard, right? These are strategic conversations where you are talking about things you're engaged in and things that the committee can support. Right, so HR might bring a particular initiative, and then the security, information security is trying to figure out when to do phishing training, but they don't want to overlap with HR training, or they don't want to overlap with the culture survey. So that is your opportunity to really effectively coordinate kind of across the different functions, and to do so with a formal touch point that you would have once a quarter, often with a strategy session around annual planning when your company does your annual planning process.
Yeah.
So that's the formal side. The informal side is connection building, and and I would think of this as concentric circles, right? So you have your critical control function partners: human resources, legal, finance, audit, information technology / information security, privacy, if that doesn't roll up to the compliance program. Sometimes we see sanctions in there, depending on the business you're in, right? So everybody's business is going to be a little different. Safety, health and safety.
Yeah, sure.
Often something that we see in their sustainability, if you have a sustainability department. So all of those are different functions, that depending on your company, that you would think about as in that near circle. Then you go out a layer, right? And then you're going to think about some of your key business partners, maybe if procurement's really, supply chain's really important, maybe they're in your inner circle, or maybe they're that next ring out. Anyway, you map all the functions, then you figure out, and this goes to a little bit the second question you're going to ask.
Yes.
You figure out what you can bring them that will make their job easier, and build that bridge, right? Because at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is you're trying to build a net that is going to cover all of your people-created risk and catch things when they fall.
Yeah.
Right? And you don't care who they fall to, right?
Yep.
You just want to know what's going on. And so you build the net, you create that interconnected web of relationships. You catch the things, you fix the things, you tell the story of how you fix the thing so that you can show the value that compliance is bringing.
So one of the things that I'm really fascinated about with the state of the art for ethics and compliance is just how important the soft skills aspect of it really has become in terms of building alliances, building relationships. Yep. It's become very much a relationship business as well. But I know, there are folks out there for whom that aspect of their career is a painful one, and they don't really want to lean into it. So I get, and which is tough, and I get that. But I guess my question to you is, how far can a great program go just on the formal side alone? And if you just want to defer that informal part you just spoke about, I mean, can you actually have a really strong program without that informal part, or is it just going to be forever hobbled?
You can have a very strong program.
Yeah.
Right. I would argue there is no way it will be effective.
Sure.
Without the informal piece, right?
Yeah.
So this goes back to the evaluation of corporate compliance programs. Is it well designed? You can have a very well designed formal program.
Yeah.
Does it work in practice?
Yeah.
Right? That's one of the questions that the department has been told, the prosecutors have been told to ask is, does it work?
Yeah.
Is your program working? Right?
Yeah.
And that's where those informal pieces come in, because you can have the very best formal program in the world. Yeah. You can have wonderful pieces to your puzzle. You can have great monitoring. You can have superb third-party diligence practices. If your Moroccan-based sales agent doesn't want to follow those processes,
where are you going to go?
Falls down.
Yeah.
Right.
So, well, if I can offer a piece of intelligence I picked up yesterday, we had a great BELA networking event, and I had a wonderful conversation with two folks who had been from organizations that had received World's Most Ethical Companies honors more than 10 times. Each company had more than 10 times. And they were speaking to somebody who was like, they were looking to apply for the first time and trying to get some tips on, well, what do we do? And both of them had a very interesting point that speaks to that informal piece you just spoke about, which is that, before you apply, reach out to all of those partners you have across the enterprise and let them know what you're about to do and what it's going to entail, so you can get all those ducks in a row. So when the application process actually begins, everybody knows what's going to be expected of them, and they know how to rally, and you've already done all that organization. And it's funny because as you were talking about the informal piece, it struck me, you can't do all that unless you have the informal piece already there, and it's not about just about receiving an honor, it's about creating best practices. But strikes me as a very concrete way. If you are meaning to apply to the world's most ethical companies, that informal piece is something that's going to be really key to many things, not least of which is your application itself.
No, it's a really good point, Bill, and I was smiling the way that I was smiling listening to that story, because the world's most ethical companies questionnaire is deliberately crafted to force you to work with the partners that we want you to be working with, right? Like, that is the point. And so, look, even if you have no intention of ever trying to get recognized in that context, it's not on your radar screen at all. Use the EQ to help you identify those functions across your business that you need to go build those informal relationships with. Because regardless of whether you ever have any intention of any of the accolades, it will make your program more effective to find your sister control functions, right?
Absolutely.
That is a purposeful piece of the puzzle, and I just you gotta include it.
Indeed. Well, I have a second question for you.
Yes,
Are you ready?
I am ready. This is the question.
The question is this: How do you convince people that the ethics and compliance team is not merely there to tell you no or look to get people in trouble? And I think there's also an additional context to this one when I received it, which is, beyond the policies and procedures you can put into place, how do you avoid having to swim upstream if the culture is already conditioned to see you as the Department of No? Perhaps in a previous regime, it had been run as a Department of No.
Yep.
How do you reverse all that rather than starting from a neutral spot?
Yep. And the reason I don't see the questions that far in advance when Bill and I do these BELA asks. So, but I had seen this one because Bill wanted me to know that this one was coming. And I laugh because it is the perennial question. Right?
Sure.
It's the question. Bill, I've been doing this work for 22, 23 years, something along those lines, right? And we've, it's been something that is, it's always come up. Right? It's always come up. So look, and it came up yesterday. And it might have come up this morning again as well. But anyway, it definitely came up yesterday in a couple of the conversations that we had from the main stage, and including with my chat with Matt Galvin from the Department of Justice. Like, there are absolutely people who are going to see a traditional compliance function as the cops, who are just there to, get people in trouble.
Sure.
And look, there is an element of regulatory compliance that has been historically run that way, right? Like, hey, we've got a rule, you broke the rule, here are the consequences for breaking the rule, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
But most ethics and compliance questions are more in what Antonio Fernandez yesterday from the first session called the gray, right? At many companies, if it is clearly illegal, they've already decided not to do it, right? So they're bringing you in as a compliance function to have conversations in the gray. And the only way you can have conversations in the gray is if you are seen as a strategic partner to the business.
Yeah.
So you got to look for the small wins. And when you find the small wins, you got to talk about the small wins. You got to talk about that particular supplier that would have been a disaster and you stopped it. You got to talk about the M&A deal that was cheaper because you found the issue. You got to talk about the thing that you got to self-disclose, and therefore you get credit from the government. You got to talk about all the places where you have stopped the problem before it got enormous, stopped the problem before it happened at all, saved the company money, right? Tell those stories, and engage with the business from the perspective of solving the problem. And be willing to do that over and over and over again because of the legacy for some companies that compliance has been the Department of No. I mean, the reason this is a reputational challenge for a compliance team is because it's been true. Right? And in certain circumstances it's been true. So you've just got to take a breath, tell the story, right? Take a breath, tell the story again. Understand that people are afraid to come to you, tell the stories, right? Showcase the wins, highlight the ways in which you've been a good partner to the business, the things you've been able to accomplish because of the team that you have in place, the practices, the programs, and then look for places where, you can start to make your ROI story a little bit more robust, right? Is there a particular manager that is really using your toolkits, and hey, by the way, that manager also has a lower turnover rate because they've been able to hold on to really engaged, terrific staff.
Sure.
Tell the story, right? Tell the story. Don't just tell the bad stories, tell the good stories, tell the wins, right? Celebrate the wins. And so that is the way that I would answer that question.
Fantastic. Well, Erica, thank you so much for bringing your expertise to bear on these questions.
Pleasure.
I learn something every time I speak with you. Thank you so very much. It's been fantastic. And to everyone out there who's watching, whether you're here live in Atlanta or if you're watching virtually, please, if you have questions, send them our way. We call this BELA Asks because these are questions that come from the BELA community. But you know what? At GES, everybody's part of the BELA community. Everybody asks. So if you have a question, even if you're not part of the Business Ethics Leadership Alliance, by all means, we want to hear from you so we can advance the discipline together. There's no competition and compliance. So please make sure to bring your questions to us. So Erica, on behalf of everyone, thank you very much for joining us.
My absolute pleasure, Bill. To everybody out there, keep those questions coming. I think the fact that Bill and I have been here 3 times today shows you that we will keep coming back to answer them.